Hey there everyone, this is Samuel Johnson and welcome back to the Spider-Verse Retrospectives. And today, we'll be continuing our trek through the Edge of Spider-Verse mini-series as we take a look at Edge of Spider-Verse number 4, I Walked with a Spider. Now, we all know the story of Peter Parker, right? Of course we do. You wouldn't be here otherwise if you didn't at least know that much. And you know about how he got his powers, how he tried using them, and how he eventually learned the lessons of power and responsibility and went on to become Spider-Man. But the thing is, while that is such a famous story, there are many ways that the tale could have been twisted. At any point during the tale, all it would take is changing a few key details, and suddenly this story of heroism rising above all else can turn into something a bit more dark, something more twisted. Which is what brings us to today's issue. Because before I get to the plot summary, allow me to ask you a simple question. What if the tale of Spider-Man wasn't the story of the birth of a hero, but was rather a horror story? Which brings me to our main character. This reality's proxy to Peter Parker, Patton Parnell. Now, from a glance, Patton's life looks very similar to that of Peter Parker. And you could be mistaken for them essentially being the same thing, as, like Peter, Patton is a nerdy, geeky, social outcast in school who's constantly made fun of by his peers, and who, like Peter, has a crush on his redheaded next-door neighbor, and sadly, he's also lost his parents, and as a result, he has gone to go live with his uncle. However, while this does look pretty similar to Peter Parker's life, there are some things that, if you took a better look around, you notice are very different. Case in point, well, Peter Parker was ultimately a good-natured kid who, obviously having a few issues with being trotted on, was ultimately had a good sense of morals, and while he could be a little selfish, at the end of the day, I'd say he was a pretty well-rounded kid. Patton Parnell is a little psychopath. He's just kind of a creep. Like, he spends a good chunk of his days either torturing small animals and calling them experiments, or perving on his next-door neighbor, this world's proxy to Mary Jane, named Sarah Jane, even thinking about going into her house and stealing some of her underwear. On top of that, while Peter Parker lived with his supportive Aunt May and Uncle Ben, Patton Parnell lives with his abusive Uncle Ted, who is pretty much a no-nonsense, do what I say or else you get the belt kind of guardian, and who honestly does not want Patton around at all, and who only took him in because he was talked into it. Otherwise, if Patton does so much as look at him funny, like I said, whap with the belt. So, put simply, Patton's life is not that well off compared to Peter's. Not helped by the fact that when he is ostracized, he kind of has fantasies about killing his classmates. However, despite these differences, Patton is still the proxy to Peter Parker in this world, and since this is a Spider-Verse story, things do change for him in that regard. And it all begins on the day that he and his classmates took a trip to this world's equivalent of Oscorp, Alcorp. As while on the bus going there, Sarah Jane actually comes to sit with him. Now, Sarah Jane has no idea that Patton is perving on her, so she just thinks he's a harmless bookworm. So she just kind of goes up to him and starts talking. And Patton, he's justifiably confused, as apparently she has never talked to him in the entire time that they've lived next door to each other. So he's just kind of wondering what the hell's going on. But, it turns out that Sarah does have some ulterior motives. She's partially talking to him, as we learn later, because it's implied that she does feel sorry for him because she is aware of what his uncle puts him through. But the thing is, she does want Patton's help or something. You see, while Alcorp is supposed to be the leader in all these technological advancements in pharmaceuticals and technology, she's heard rumors that they experiment on lab animals, altering their DNA, using them for as test subjects, and so on and so forth. And she thinks it's inhuman, and she wants her and Patton to do something about it. And Patton, well, he doesn't really want to say no because, like I said, he's infatuated with this girl. Although the thing is, she is already dating someone in the form of this reality's proxy to Flash Thompson named Jean, who is just as much of a meathead as Flash was when he was in high school. But ultimately, when Patton and his class go to Alcorp, the plan does get set in motion, as once they end up going through a tour of Alcorp's building, Sarah ends up grabbing Patton's arm and runs off into a restricted area. Unfortunately, the instant they enter the animal testing area, they end up setting off alarms, and Sarah just immediately realizes they're screwed, so she tells Patton to just grab as many animals as he can carry and then get out of there. And as Patton is looking around the lab, his attention is drawn to a spider, a big red one with a warning label on front of it that says warning, irradiated spider, female. Although he doesn't actually see that part, but he does see the spider and thinks it looks beautiful. So he decides to reach into its area and grab it, and sure enough, it bites him. Which is at the point when the security team arrives. Of course, Patton and Sarah are immediately brought aside, and the teacher is just apologizing up and down to just saying, "I'm sorry, but this won't happen again," and while the security is chewing the kids and the teacher out, but Patton is just kind of feeling out of it. And while the security team does call Sarah's parents, and Patton himself doesn't want them calling his Uncle Ted, Sarah ultimately just tells them that she can bring Patton home with her because, well, in her words, she thinks he's harmless, and she didn't. And here's the thing, hold on one second. Sorry about that. Got a little paranoid about something. But anyway, yeah, like she said, she thinks he's harmless. Harmless. She put him up to it. It's all fine. But the thing that again, he's still thinking about the spider bite because for whatever reason, the spot is burning. And well, the comic then cuts to the next day, and Patton's really not doing so well for himself to the point where he wants to stay home, which earns him a few licks from his uncle. However, he does end up staying at home for the day, and well, he's not feeling right, as he just feels weak. He feels hungry, and for whatever reason, any food that he tries to eat doesn't stay down. For whatever reason, he's craving something else. And sure enough, when he seems to get that something else when he sees a rat get caught in a mouse trap, and for whatever reason, he's compelled to the rat, pulling it out of the trap and swallowing it whole, revealing that his teeth are now sharp. And for whatever reason, that seems to do the trick, as he suddenly feels stronger, much better, but he's still hungry. He needs something. He needs more subjects, as he puts it, which results in him kidnapping a neighborhood cat. However, as he tries to eat the cat as well, the cat ends up putting on a fight and scratches him across the face, resulting in him dropping it. However, before the cat can make a run for it, on instinct, Patton shoots a web at it and wrapping it up. And it's at this point Patton realizes what the hell is going on with him. It's the spider bite, which much like with every other Spider-Man in the multiverse, he's now pretty much gained spider powers, which includes, yes, the strength, speed, agility, clean the walls, and for him, the ability to shoot webs, which he thinks is amazing. He thinks this is just like, wow, I'm sort of in my own science experiment. But the thing is, he also realizes that his strength seems to be connected directly to how much he eats. And if he's this strong just from eating a rat, then the only logical solution is to just keep eating. Which is when the comic cuts ahead yet again to later that night as Uncle Ted is coming home. Now, Uncle Ted just when he comes inside is immediately wondering where's his dinner, what's going on. But for whatever reason, there's no dinner, and the power isn't working. And so he tries to turn on the light, nothing happens, and he smells something rank and putrid. And as such, to try and get some light on the situation, he ends up turning on his lighter, and when he gets a good look at his dining room, it's a bit of a creep show, as pretty much around the whole room are these giant web sacks containing various animals, and he's of course wondering what the hell is going on, what is this, until he looks up on the ceiling and sees Patton just glaring down at him, telling him that it's dinner, which soon results in Patton lunging at his uncle, telling him that if his uncle has taught him anything, it's that with great power comes a great appetite. As Patton's face seems to morph into this weird, grotesque spider monster face, while his Uncle Ted is just screaming. From there, once again, the comic cuts ahead to the next day as we see Patton on his way to school, and sorry about that. Hold on a sec. Sorry, got a package. So as I was saying, the comic then cuts to the next day. Sorry, Chinny's right there, and she's being kind of a camera hog. Anyway, like I was saying, the comic then cuts to the next day as we see Patton on his way to school, and sure enough, people are noticing some of the animals he took, especially the cat, which he just kind of brushes off. But we also see that he seems a bit more confident in himself as he's going to school wearing sunglasses. But pretty much the whole time he's going through his whole day, he pretty much is just seeing he just sees the other students as cattle, bovines on their way to the slaughter, and well, he's the slaughterer, which pretty much just the whole time he's going through the day, he's just thinking about all the ways that he can use these powers to better himself, and just essentially happily delighting in how much he's going to be killing everything. As in between classes, he ends up tiding himself over by eating a pigeon before Gene challenges him to a fight during lunch in the locker room. Just the two of them. Guess what? We never see Gene again after this. And even after school, when Patton's on his way home, he ends up tricking a kid into coming back to his house with him because the kid's dog is missing, and Patton says, "Oh, your dog's in my place. Just come by." But the thing is, even through all this, Patton still feels that something's not right. He feels like he feels like something's up with him. So when he gets home, he wants to continue doing his research. And sure enough, after he does get home, he does look up the spider that bit him. And apparently, it's a highly venomous variety, with the females apparently spreading their eggs through their bite. I don't think from what I've heard, there are no spiders in the world that do that, but hey, let's play suspension of disbelief with this and say that that's possible. Either way, Patton finds this interesting, but as he's researching, someone ends up ringing on his doorbell, and sure enough, it's Sarah Jane, who wants to talk to Patton because she doesn't know where Gene is, and Patton was the last person to have seen Gene. Of course, Patton tries playing dumb and says he hasn't seen him, but as he invites Sarah in, he begins asking, "Well, what did you see in that guy? He seems a bit beneath you." Sarah is a little taken aback in this sudden confidence from Patton, and Patton just says, "I think it's probably just a new me. How do you like it?" And Sarah says that she does kind of like it, and Patton just says, "You ain't seen nothing yet," as he leads her upstairs, and then goes in for a kiss, before biting Sarah's neck, which even she's shocked by. At which point, the next panel that we see is the sunglasses pulled down a little, and we finally see why he was wearing them. Patton's eyes are now completely red. And sure enough, after he bites Sarah, he begins smiling evilly as he talks about how nobody ever saw him before. No one knew him before, but now he's more powerful. Now he's stronger. He's much better. He is Spider-Man. And then Sarah slaps him across the face, which not only knocks off the sunglasses, but also tears his skin a little. And we see that Patton has changed Patton's changed in more ways than just his eyes. As underneath, we see that his skin is now gray, and we see a second eye on his head. And then when Patton tells Sarah that she shouldn't have done that, the rest of the skin comes off, and we see his head is transformed into this weird spider monstrosity. Red eyes, like these two big mandibles right out of the front of his mouth. He's more spider than man at this point. At this point, Sarah realizes she needs to get out of here before she can run down the stairs. Patton blocks the way with a web line, and so the only place she can go is his room. And sure enough, it's a veritable house of horrors in there as well, as hung around the whole room are web lines with various animals that he's trapped, the kid that he tricked into coming to his house earlier, and tied to the bed is his Uncle Ted, who seems to be in just agony. And during all this, Patton ends up crawling into the room as we see him transforming more and more, shedding his clothes, and as he just continues mutating into this spider creature, as he ends up growing extra arms, more extra legs, and yes, Sarah's just justifiably horrified, just begging Patton not to kill her, but Patton assures her no, he doesn't want to kill her, he loves her, he wants her to stay with him, and he owes his new life to her. Why would he want to do that? No. He doesn't want her dead. he wants her help because you see in his research he discovered that he was a carrier, that he has that. And the thing is, say he knows Sarah loves animals, so he knows that she'd be willing to help him, because he has so many mouths to feed now. And sure enough, we soon see why Uncle Ted has been in agony, as from his body comes hundreds of spiders, all coming out of every orifice the old man has. And yes, it is fucking creepy. And they end up crawling towards Sarah, and she's just pretty much backed into a corner. But at this point in the comic, remembers one very important fact: it's a Spider-Verse tie-in, and as such, while this is going on, Sarah and Patton get an unexpected guest to their little confrontation, Morlun, who claims that he came to this reality because, well, he could sense Patton from the farthest dimensions. Of course, when Patton realizes that Morlun's there, he immediately asks who the hell he is, and after Morlun introduces himself, he just says, "You can think of me as a surprise dinner guest," which soon results in Patton letting out a screech before lunging at him. But the thing is, Morlun's an inheritor, and he just starts wiping the floor with Patton as when Patton lunges at him, he not only grabs him by the throat, but he rips off one of his arms. When Patton tries to bite him, he rips off one of his mandibles, and then kind of delivering the coup de grace, he manages to grab Patton and then just suck the life force right out of him, showcasing that for all of Patton's newfound power, well, he's nothing in comparison to him, with Morlun the entire time pretty much comparing him to an unripe piece of fruit who will make for a great appetizer for the Feast of Thousands. But in the midst of all this, Sarah Jane realizes that attention is now off her, and so as everything's going on, she ends up brushing all the spiders off her, and then just bolts out of the room and out of Patton's house, just constantly repeating herself, "It's just a dream, it's just a dream, it's just a dream, it's just a dream, it's just a dream." And from there, the comic then cuts to the next day, as we see her in her room, just kind of trying to somewhat reassure herself that it was a dream. But the thing is, she still has the bite mark that Patton left her. And while her mom calls her down, telling her that she's got to get ready for school, she says she'll be down in a minute. And as she examines the bite mark, we soon see something crawling beneath her skin. And from the bite mark, we see a little red spider coming out. And the last panel we see of the comic is Sarah Jane screaming as spiders begin crawling out from under her skin. Yeah, it's kind of fucked up. But anyway, my thoughts on Edge of Spider-Verse number 4. I'm going to say this right now. This is probably my favorite issue of the series. Mostly because I love the angle that it takes things here. Because, well, like I said at the beginning, at a glance, Patton Parnell's life is very much a mirror of Peter Parker's in many ways. And you could be forgiven if you thought that they were the same, if they were the same. But the thing is, while he and Peter do have very similar lives, there are enough key differences in certain places so that Patton is not the same as Peter. Because while Peter could be a little selfish, and especially when he first got his powers, at the end of the day, he was a good kid with supportive guardians who did their best to love him and care for him, and ultimately he was given a good life, and he did have a good sense of morals, especially when something bad did happen because of his inaction. It did kind of hit home for him and made him realize, okay, I can't just abuse these powers. I have to do something with them. Whereas with Patton, his life is just crap. Not only is he still mocked and ostracized by his peers, but like I said, he lives with an abusive uncle. And the thing is, even before he got his powers, this kid was a little messed up in the head. Like I said, he spent his days were usually spent torturing small animals and calling it experiments. He constantly liked to peep on his next door neighbor, and even thought about stealing her underwear. And like I said, whenever the other students were making fun of him, he always thought he fantasized. Like one little narration we had was him talking about how it was an infection that seemed to spread to everyone, and that it was his professional opinion that they needed to corral all of the infected into an incinerator, burn them all before it spreads. Yeah, pretty simply, Patton was already a messed up little twerp, and sadly, the spider powers just kind of seem to bring out more of what was there, as which kind of further emphasizes how this is more like like a horror story version of the Spider-Man origin story. Because in many regards, there are a lot of ways that the Spider-Man origin story could be interpreted as a horror story. Getting bitten and having your genetic structure altered to that of a spider. And in the case of Patton, we see that how that further goes. As not only does he gain spider powers, but his entire physiology changes. As not only does he gain these powers, but he begins mutating. His entire genetic structure is completely altered. As when he first gets his powers, he's hungry for living matter, for living creatures. He eats a rat that was caught in a mousetrap. He kidnaps a cat, and essentially, like he said, the more he eats, the stronger he gets. And in that regard, it's not that he gets spider powers, it's that he's being mutated into a monster. But the thing is, if something like this were to but the thing is, because Patton was already messed up, he still sees these new abilities as a gift. He still thinks, "Wow, I now have amazing powers." It's just he doesn't see the fact that he's now been transformed into this monster as a bad thing. If anything, he starts reveling in it. He starts enjoying it. He's more than happy to give up his humanity if just to have this power. And with it, he of course starts using it to get back at everyone who ever wronged him. He goes after his Uncle Ted. He goes after Jean. And when it gives him a chance to get closer to Sarah, he takes it. And it's just clear that this kid that essentially the spider powers just emphasize the worst parts of him. And sadly, the more they are integrated into a system, the worse he seems to get, as he just keeps happily grabbing people to continue furthering along his transformation. Hell, kind of going back to how he likes to torture animals and consider them as science experiments. When he went to go grab the cat to eat it, he called it Subject 33. But then the next day, when the kid comes by looking for his dog, he calls it. He thinks himself, looks like I just found Subject 67, which showcases just how busy this kid has been since he got his powers. It's honestly really effed up in that regard, and the whole story is just so unnerving and creepy and twisted, and just the whole time you really do feel like the things are just getting worse little by little. It doesn't at the end it's eventually it doesn't feel like the story of Spider-Man. It feels like like I said, it feels like a true to life horror story. Just seeing this boy being transformed slowly into this monster, hurting people happily, luring people in, and by the end, when you see his parlor, so to speak, and see him all twisted and mutated into this giant grotesque spider creature, it's just fucked up. And it's not helped by the artwork. The art, which I'm just gonna say right now, it's fantastic. I love the artwork in the story. All the characters really do, like, while the characters are all meant to be kind of facsimiles of characters that you know from the main Marvel universe, they look close enough to the originals that they're very identifiable. But they're also very realistic. They're also really realistic. And when it gets to the horror, it's just amazing. It looks amazing. The way I'm not going to show it to you for guidelines, but I'll just give you an example of the artwork if I can find it. Like, this is the artwork. It's actually, I think it's honestly really good. Just look at Patton here. He really does look like a facsimile of Peter, but at the same time, the more you get to know the characters, the more you start to see the differences. And kind of going back to that page you just saw, when it gets to the horror, it really has a way of emphasizing it. There, when you see the spider and it's all code, when you see the red spider, it's like the spider itself is just giving off warning lights saying, "Don't go near this thing, don't go near it." And when the way Patton just continually evolves into this monster over the course of the story, it really is just a horrific sight to see, especially when you start seeing him accumulating his collection, so to speak. When you start seeing all the people and animals he's captured to help feed himself and later his offspring. When you see Uncle Ted tied to the bed and him begging for it to be killed, and seeing all the spiders crawling out, it just ugh. Even the final image with Sarah Jane, which I'm not going to repeat talking about it, it's just ugh. It's just gross, and it's just gross. But at the same time, it's such a unique and interesting take on the tale of Spider-Man. Because, like I said, there are enough things in the story that you can identify it as an alternate Spider-Man. Like I said, Patton Parnell is very clearly a proxy to Peter Parker, and a lot of the elements of and a lot of the superficial elements of his life are very similar to that of Peter's story. Like again, dead parents, Patton girl, redhead next door, his Uncle Ted, so on and so forth. There is enough there so that you can identify the story, but there are enough things different that instead of Patton becoming a hero with his powers and using them for the greater good, he lets them transform him into a monster and willingly embraces the darkness. It's just a very unique and twisted take. And ultimately when the when Moreland finally does enter the frame, does remind you this is a tie into Spider-Verse, it feels kind of admittedly weird. It's not off-putting because in a way it does feel nice to get back into some superhero stuff, but because the tale feels so drastically different from what you would expect in a Spider-Man story, it really feels strange when an element from those actual stories is thrown in. But even then by the end, even when Patton is stopped and Moreland kills him, he still left his mark, as on the final page you see Sarah still dealing with the aftereffects of Patton's bite and showcasing that despite Patton being gone, the mark he's left is still remains, both figuratively and literally. And honestly, it's just makes for a really unique and interesting story that manages to take the tale of Spider-Man and twist it so much on its head that it becomes something else. And quite honestly, I like that sort of. I like it. I think it's honestly a really damn good story as a result, and hands down is probably one of my favorites. On top of that, what am I like? On top of that, there are some things about it that I like. On top of that, there are some little minor things that I like in the story. Like when Patton is undergoing his transformation, there are moments when his dialogue does mirror that of Peter Parker's when he first got his powers, like when he eats the rat. Excuse me a sec. Sorry about that. Anyway, as I was saying, there are little things in there that do help you kind of see the connections between Patton and Peter, as when he's getting his powers and being mutated, like when there are some lines of dialogue that are taken straight from Amazing Fantasy number 15. Admittedly, it's just a couple, but it's still a little nice that it's still kind of cool they're in there. Like when he eats the rat, when he makes the rat and he says he feels the fantastic power coursing through him. That's straight from Amazing Fantasy 15. Same with when he ends up webbing up the cat and he says somehow the spider's bite transferred his power to me. That is a line straight out of Amazing Fantasy number 15. First appearance of Spider-Man. So it is pretty good. So I do kind of like that, as it does help emphasize that Patton is an alternate version of Peter Parker. It's just, again, where it's just that there are enough differences in Patton's life so that when he gets these spider powers, and even when they do end up mutating him in ways that the original Peter Parker never was, instead of wanting to use them to be a hero, he uses them to become he pretty much becomes the bad guy, and he loves it. He pretty much embraces it. At one point, even in the story, when he's contemplating everything, he thinks that spider has given me a gift. I can use these powers for good. I could use these powers for good to help mankind. But where's the fun in that? Being a superhero is so boring. Just there is enough different. There is enough similar so you can identify the characters, their roles, and the story, but there's enough difference so that it can go off in its own unique direction. And quite honestly, I think that's really cool. I think that works overall and makes for a very unique and interesting take on the web slinger. Hold on a second. Again, apologies, but I probably should wrap this up pretty soon anyway. My point is this: what I do pretty much. The story, I feel, is a very unique take on the tale of Spider-Man, keeping enough elements of the original story there so you can easily identify it, while still changing enough there so that it can go off in its own direction. And as a result, it leads to turning one of the most iconic superhero origin stories into a really twisted tale of a troubled youth being transformed into a monster, and it works so well. As a result, it is probably my favorite issue in the whole Edge of Spider-Verse miniseries. Doesn't mean the other issues are bad. It just means that I think this one's the best. So I pretty much combine that with really good artwork that with really good artwork that managed to get that manages to really get across just the horrific nature of everything, especially in how it's designed, the colors. I especially love the colors when you see Patton's room after he's transformed. It's just all dark and grimy and creepy. It's just real. It really does emphasize it well. I especially, which another little thing I like that showcases Moreland as an apex predator, because Moreland is supposed to be debonair. Is supposed to be debonair, kind of going in line with his role as an inheritor of reality. He's wearing like this big coat, kind of a little tie, his hair slicked back, but at the same time you see his eyes just glowing red. And while Patton is kind of crouched down, Moreland's just standing up like, oh, what do we have here? It's, again, nice little subtle difference. But overall, Edge of Spider-Verse #4, I think is just a really damn good story that manages to keep enough things similar but enough different so that it can be its own unique thing, and does a good job at translating the tale of Spider-Man and turning it into a horror story. So yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say. So yeah, I hope that all the fumbles I hope you're able to get past all the fumbles. I thank you for watching, and I hope that you tune in Thursday as we take a look at the final issue in the Edge of Spider-Verse and actually see the comic version of another Spidey that you might know. But, well, if you do. So if you know who it is, I hope you look forward to that. If not, well, I still hope you look forward to it. So until then, I hope you have a good night. I'm Samuel Johnson, and I'll see you on Thursday. Take care.